Hey team, today we're looking at eczema through two powerful lenses, traditional Chinese medicine and real world mold and toxin exposure. Because for so many families, eczema isn't just food, it's not just the skin. There's heat and there's dampness and digestive weakness and environmental triggers, and in some cases, mold and chemical overload. And if you are a parent thinking, well, we eat clean and we've done the lotions, and why is my child still so itchy? Or is something in our home making this worse? This episode is going to connect the dots. We cover the TCM side, why the lung and large intestine are tied to the skin, and why itching spikes at night, and how heat shows up in the body, and the mold side, how to actually test, what's worth paying for, what's not, and what a normal parent can do if moving or remediating isn't an option. And quick heads up, if you want a step-by-step plan to calm the itch, improve gut function, and support detox gently at home, join the eczema elimination method at eczemakids.com. You'll get the food framework, the supplement strategy, the home environment checklist that work in real life. Our guest today is Dr. Ashley Beckman, a doctor of Chinese medicine, a licensed acupuncturist, and a board-certified herbalist known for her work in mold detoxification and root cause healing. Let's get into it. Is your child struggling with itchy nights and endless flare-ups? I'm Andrew McHugh, mom of 4 and host of Eczema Kids. Here you'll find natural solutions that actually work so you can heal your child's eczema without steroids, without the overwhelm, and finally see calm, healthy skin again. Let's get into it. Friends, you are going to love today's guest. Dr. Ashley Beckman is a doctor of Chinese medicine. She's a licensed acupuncturist and a board-certified herbalist who has performed more than 50,000 treatments over the past decade. She holds a doctorate in healthy aging and longevity with a thesis on epigenetics, so she understands both ancient and healing and cutting-edge science. And her focus is on cellular detox and gut health and environmental toxins and mold recovery and helping people with chronic conditions by getting to the root and not just managing the symptoms. And that's why I'm so excited to have you here today, Ashley, because eczema isn't just a skin problem, right? It's a body problem. And Chinese medicine has been mapping those patterns out for thousands of years. So Dr. Ashley, welcome to the Eczema Kids podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I love working with kids, right? It's really fun. I mean, I love working with families too. And a lot of the times we're working with moms and kids. And it's just really nice when we can help clear these things up when they're little so it doesn't become a lifelong issue.
Yeah, it sincerely does change the whole trajectory of their life. And that's, I guess, the
Yep.
silver lining. If you're experiencing this with your baby or just a child of any age, right? There's still just so much time that we can reverse this and get them going down the right path.
Yes.
And so everyone here is concerned about eczema. It's affecting their lives. And, either they have it, kids have it, there's something going on there. So I wanted to start out from a traditional Chinese medicine perspective.
Mm.
What is eczema? What's actually happening internally when we see these rashes and flare-ups on the skin?
Sure. So generally, it depends a little bit if it's red. You know what I mean? With the redness, there's a heat component in Chinese medicine. So one thing I love about Chinese medicine is we're always looking at if something is hot or cold in nature, and then what organ or channel or meridian pathway it's affecting. So that can show up as some tools to help you with eczema, right? To see where is it popping up on the body. Then we can look at an organ pathway to see which could be implicated with that. And then we're looking too at the deficiencies or excess in an organ. So a lot of times the lung and the large intestine are very much connected to the skin. So when we have skin issues, we always have to look at that. And then we look at sometimes the emotions associated as well. So with the emotions, there's a lot of grief, resentment, or holding on to things. Again, it's not always that with little kids, but that's when, again, if you have a little one, you look and see what was going on during the mom's pregnancy as well for her emotional state. And sometimes that can set up what's going on with the kids.
Yeah. So when you see cases of eczema show up in your practice, would you say there's a heat component in every case? Yeah. Yeah.
Usually it's manifesting as this heat, right? The redness. Again, it can be dry or wet. So that can be more of a dampness or component added to it. Then I look again, like as you do, what are the potential triggers that have allowed this to happen, right? Is it with their environment, something that was internal combination? What's going on with the gut, their emotions, their environment, so many different pieces to put together. The food,
I know.
yeah.
That's the problem, right? It's just I wish, there was a silver bullet, but no, it takes us on this whole holistic journey, and that's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
would you say the origin it really I love what you're saying because it really helped me as just a mere mortal parent 6 years ago. Like, look at this
Mhm.
problem. I had 2 kids suffering from severe, severe eczema, and
Yeah.
you can feel the heat, like, my month-old baby, you could feel the heat coming off of her body, like, from feet away. It was just so crazy, and it really helped me to look at, okay, what types of things would balance this, like, opposites balance, like,
Yeah.
that type of viewpoint of putting on those lenses, it really helped me sift through all the information that I was consuming and
Yeah.
hearing, and it's like, what does that actually connect with what we're experiencing, like, the specific issue that we're experiencing?
Yeah, and even I mean, so babies too, they're born with all this heat and qi, right? Like in Chinese medicine, we talk about how they're just like this bundle of energy, right? Because they're brand new. And of course
Mhm.
they're gaining energy, but like they're warm, right? And tend to be more like damp and moist when they're getting like all chubby and you know what I mean? There's just a lot of like rolls and dampness and heat. But it can get out of control, of course, right? And then when it's manifesting, I mean, so eczema hasn't been a part of like my history. You know, a lot of us get into these things because of our personal journey or something with our kids, right? And so it was never something that I like dove into in that regard for my daughter or myself. But I was very sensitive to perfumes and anything like, carpet smells, any smells, toxins of any sort, including mold and things like that. So those can kind of go together. It's just how it manifests in our body. And so for a lot of people and kids, it manifests on the skin. I just happened to get migraines and joint pain. So I kind of went down that trajectory, if that makes sense, like on the neurological side. But
Mhm.
what we see so much is, I mean, eczema is just so common. And unfortunately, it just seems so crazy that someone so tiny could have
Huh.
so much already, right? Like have these health concerns. And as a new parent, I mean, it looks so painful. And we know it is really painful and very dysregulating for the child, too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing is if you visit the pediatrician first, or
Yeah.
the allergist or the dermatologist, because it looks like a skin issue is
Right.
presenting as a skin issue. And can you delve in a little bit more about what those deeper imbalances look like inside
Sure.
the body?
So, I mean, there's a couple things that what I was noticing, at least in my practice, is, and again, I do focus a lot on seeing when you're looking at root causes, toxins are a big chunk of potential issues, right? So, when I had a bunch of little kids that come in with eczema, and I was seeing them more at like 2 or 3 years old, because the mom would come in because she was sick, but then she'd say, "Oh, well, my daughter has eczema or my little son has eczema." And so, because we'd already run a mold test on the mom, started running the urine mold tests on the little kids. It's very easy to do from home since it's not blood. And we were seeing so much mold in the kids. And they were usually born into that house that had mold, was the sickest child, if that makes sense, with eczema. So I was just seeing such a big pattern of, the mom that was already very not doing well, not thriving at all, and had mystery symptoms, but it was manifesting in the kids that were toddlers as eczema. And their mold was even worse than the mom's, often because that was the only home they knew. And the mom was also pregnant in that home.
If you suspect mold in your home or playing a role, negatively in your family's health, what can you realistically do as a mere mortal parent? How do you go about addressing that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd say first, if to me, whenever I have a client, especially a little kiddo with eczema or an adult, I check for mold in the body because it might be from something before, or sometimes it's from their preschool or their school. So it might not always be from home. And then another big one is again looking at the gut health, right? So a lot of things that could be inflammatory for the child that the parents weren't allergic or sensitive to, but the little child, it's a whole different being. And so they have a whole different set of things going on. And then always, I'm sure that like when I studied homeopathy first, right? So
Mhm.
homeopathy is really lovely because it's so gentle and it can be great with kids. And plus, kids love to take it because it tastes like candy. So
Mhm.
it's really nice to be able to have some tools that are easy to kind of implement. And the thing is, though, is of course you have to look at some of the basic things, like if you're still using detergent with fragrance or certain things, because even the things that are labeled as clean often are not, right? So most people, I think people are aware of this, but then I realize a lot aren't, right? They still might have like they're using the something that they used as a kid, which is full of chemicals and fragrance, and people don't realize just even fragrance alone can house hundreds of ingredients. And so when you have that brand new baby skin, it's just very delicate. And so it could be the sheets, it could be the detergent, it could be, the cleaning products in the home. Like there's just so many things now, so the indoor air quality is really critical. So even if you didn't have mold, but you still have maybe a new home, right? Your baby could be reacting to all of the outgassing of the chemicals and things like that too. So
Yeah.
the air filters are really critical just for that, especially the bedroom for the baby.
Yeah, yeah, take care of the sleeping environment
Yes.
first,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Mhm.
most critical. What sort of tests do you run to identify mold?
Sure. So for in the body, I use urine mycotoxin testing. So I usually use the company called Vibrant America. And there's another company, Mosaic, as well, but Vibrant checks for about 30 markers versus 18. So a lot of times people might run a test and then it could miss some things because there's another test that checks for double the amount of markers. So I opt for that one usually. And then if you're looking at the home, which is important, right? So there's a wide variety going from inexpensive to comprehensive.
Mhm.
I know there's a lot of discrepancy on this, but I still start with the test plates because it's the least expensive. It's the least reliable, of course, but it at least can give you just a little idea possibly, and that's a $30 test that's analyzed at a lab, right? So
Yeah,
it's inexpensive to buy the plate, but you wanna send it off to get it analyzed.
yeah.
And then you could go air sample, but again, you can't rely on just an air sample because you can have lots of clients with perfectly clean air, but there's hidden mold, right, under a floorboard or by a toilet or behind the washing machine, and that will not come up in an air sample. And then next you have dust sample, which is something called an ERMI test. And what you can do is you're just taking this little Swiffer cloth, grabbing some dust around the house. Now you can do it per room, but a lot of times people do the whole home to get an overall picture. But you can do it per room if you're really just worried about one room. And again, that gives you another set of data. That's usually the most commonly one done. That's pretty good. And
Mhm.
then the most comprehensive, like if you were trying to decide if you needed to remediate or move, you would get an inspect. And then they're going to use all those methods in there. It's just
Okay.
more expensive.
Yeah, of course, and
And
we
you guys
start
are
there.
in Colorado, so I have, Mold Inspection Sciences is one that I use. They're out there, and they're great.
Nice. Yeah, that's where we start too. It's just like those petri dishes, right?
Yeah,
And then we
yeah.
send it off and just see if, like, if they say there's something to contend with, and then go from there. But I remember I was racking my brain, like, I even changed, like, the ring in our washer machine. I was
Oh,
like,
yeah,
"Is
yeah,
that it? Like, that doesn't look good." I mean, there's just so many, and anything that looked dark at all, I was just putting straight tea tree oil on it, to
yeah,
try and kill the mold. But then we started with the immunolytics
yes,
test, and
yeah,
um,
love them.
and they said there was nothing to worry about. Would you suggest, if you're suspecting that this is a problem, like, if you do that first, line of defense, petri dish, start a
Mhm.
test, if they say don't worry, just normal levels of mold and such, would you then continue on down the list, or would you say that's probably sufficient?
It would probably continue down the list because it just depends too on the situation, right? So I've moved from a couple of homes with mold. They
Mhm,
were rentals, so it wasn't up to me to figure out, they weren't going to remediate. They just were doing fogging, and
mhm.
the fogging does not kill enough if you're sick, right? So I was very sick in the house, so I knew something was not correct. And so I always look to who's the sickest person in the home, right? And if there are a lot of symptoms, they might not get better in that environment without, some remediation or some sort of clean, like isolating and finding out the problem, right? So unfortunately, yeah, the mold testing is difficult just because it's for it to be very comprehensive and thorough, it's expensive. And so not everybody can do that. right?
Yeah.
But then again, you can learn quite a bit and look visually at what are some things to look out for, which is what you started to do, right? A lot of these things that we're like, oh, it's just some mildew. No, it's usually mold, right?
Yeah.
And if you have musty smell, people think it's just my house, it's just musty. But no, that's a sign. Because most of the things that are difficult is like the home I lived in, you couldn't see anything. Like it was a shock, except I knew that there had been a couple of water leaks. And then again, we found another one. And so, but the whole home looked perfect, right?
Hmm.
So it takes some investigating. And again, that really only happens when someone's very sick and you're really trying to uncover what's happening. And then, especially though, pairing that with a test for the body, right? You could be chasing something and maybe mold isn't your issue.
Yeah.
But in all of my cases with kids with eczema, mold was a piece.
You also focus a lot on environmental toxicity. When we lived in California for a brief while, we moved into a recently renovated home.
Mm,
And my 3rd daughter could not be well there, like, she just could
yeah.
not. Like, we cleared up eczema for a long time, for years, and we had
Yeah.
just, like, even stayed with my in-laws while we were doing this for months, and so we're definitely not eating the best diet or anything like that,
Yeah.
and she could handle all that until we moved into that house, and then she could not have clear skin for a lot of reasons. We had to move, but
Yeah.
that was, like, for that house, that was the only way.
Yeah, and so for her too, so she probably has a piece of like histamine response that is more
Mhm,
triggered by like chemicals too.
mhm,
Like it wouldn't only be food, right? So I think that's where it's so confusing and nuanced. And again, it's so strange how even within your kids or your family, like one daughter could maybe clear it up with the gut and maybe doing you know what I mean? Like cleaning up the gut and things like that. But exposure to chemicals in the form of like paint and a new home was too much
mhm,
for her.
mhm, mhm,
Yeah, and so that's what's so confusing as the parent, right? Or the person trying to receive treatment because it just doesn't really make sense. We're so unique. And this is kind of where it goes. We look at that constitution with Chinese medicine. It's really fascinating, but we often have like a weaker system where someone, it goes to their skin and somebody else it goes to their joints or somebody else it's their brain. And there's still a lot of connections, but it manifests differently for different kids and
mhm.
adults, right?
What I consider to be required reading for any parent or just people, I guess, in general, just like a general, like, manual as to how to take care of yourself or children is Dr. Natasha Campbell's, like, GAPS diet. The preface is it just talks about, all of these things and just, like, what the inflammatory assaults that are coming at us all the time. It's a kind
Mhm.
of a stressful read, but, like, she shows how, like, eczema
It is, yeah.
Yeah, but it shows how, like, eczema and autism, it's on the same
Yeah,
continuum. It can
yeah,
just show up in any way, and
yeah.
just mirroring exactly what you're saying, and sometimes I'm like, "Well, thank goodness it's just eczema for us," right? Like, that's
Right.
reversible, like, we can
Yeah,
it's an autoimmune condition, it's very, very serious, but thank goodness, like, we can do something about this, right? Like,
yeah.
there's things.
And that's the
So
thing too, it's like, right, like if their toxin bucket is so full at a little age, right, their health trajectory, like we were talking about, has the potential to get much worse. And I never like to think that way, but it's more like
yeah,
if they're having symptoms at 4 or 5 or 3 years old or younger, like we really have to clean them up. And it's also kind of disheartening, right? Because I'm sure for you, like for me, I did all of this preconception detox. I've done all these things. We lived so healthy and all of you know what I mean? Like all her food, everything was perfect in my opinion. And then my daughter still ended up with histamine issues. And I was
mhm,
like, what? Her bucket shouldn't have been very full. But then I look at the genetic pieces and things like that. And I had realized a lot of these herbal cleanses and things that I had done for so many years, they weren't really for me specifically. And so when I ran my toxin tests initially the first time, I wasn't even going to run it because I was like, I detox 4 times a year. I've been doing this since high school. I should have nothing. But I live in Los Angeles. And
mhm,
also, I had never really taken things that weren't straight herbal cleanses.
mhm,
And my toxins were off the charts. Like the lab company said, do you work with chemicals? This is one of the worst we've ever seen. And I was so surprised and I just thought there's a genetic piece to this. that I was not really aware of. You know what I mean? I hadn't tailored this to me. Like I had just done everything with herbs and it wasn't quite enough for my particular system.
Yeah. Well, and that makes so much sense because everyone I work with is in that same boat, right? Like some
Yeah.
even live on an organic farm. Some have had,
And they still have high glyphosate, right?
at home, unmedicated births.
Yeah.
They, like, eat the healthiest, cleanest diet ever, and still, and, like, that was the case when we don't live in an organic farm, we live in Denver, and, there's a lot of things subpar, but still, I was, like, 3 for 3 once I had my 3rd daughter, I was 3 for 3 on autoimmune conditions.
Yeah.
My husband and I are seemingly healthy people and, fit and eat vegetables and would never eat a Cheeto, and
Yeah.
still.
Right.
So right? It's just
Yeah.
it's mind-boggling what can happen here. So when you're like, okay, the toxicity level is testing high, like we know that's a big issue for our kid or for ourselves. Like, how
Mhm.
do you start to detox from that?
Sure. So, well, that's one thing that's nice is again, I love pairing, kind of like ancient herbal treatments and Chinese medicine. I love homeopathy. I think that can be really helpful, especially for sensitive patients or little kids too, because I mostly use drops, like combination formulas. And then adding in some of the things, food first, of course, and especially as someone that was very sensitive to kind of like gluten and dairy and things like that, it's very personalized what could be inflammatory for each child, right? And that can change. So a lot of times kids, they're eating the same things all the time. And you can create some inflammation just from too much exposure, right? So, but again, I do realize how overwhelming it is for patients and parents. And
Yeah.
so, again, I think with the food is critical, things that are just also like full of nutrients, rotating the foods around when you can, as much as you can. And then, yeah. And again, looking to the parents, right? Like if you're someone who is sensitive, like I was very sensitive to gluten and things. So the likelihood of our kids being that way is higher.
Mhm.
And so I really did try to minimize, gluten and some certain grains and things like that for my daughter. But it's very important to rotate things around. And then again, each child is very unique, even within one family, right? So it's just important to make sure and look at each case individually. But again, we haven't even touched on like the emotions, right? Like, so
Mhm.
depending on the emotions of again, when the mom was pregnant, very important of what happens with kids. And then just like in the home, right? Like where are they in the lineup of the kids? Like are they the middle child, the young child, the older child? So they have high emotions at such a young age too. So
Yeah.
those are highly linked with skin issues. So I think
So
that's important.
yeah, I know. So when you're changing your baby's diaper and their skin is falling off,
Oh
right?
yeah,
And you're just like, "Oh my gosh, this is so bad, and I'm so stressed, and oh no, is my baby stressed?" Like, what can you do in
sure.
those moments to kinda calm everything down?
So actually I do remember my daughter had crazy diaper rash, right? And so it was really bad and I do remember some of the things too. So because I nursed her for almost 3 years, if I ate anything that was inflammatory to me, she would end up with a rash.
Mhm.
So that I think was a really big piece because I already knew I was so sensitive to foods, but I think in that phase, when you're nursing, you're just like you have to get so much food in. So I was
Mhm.
eating more grains and things, but again, my daughter didn't end up with any of those sensitivities. Sure, but I think that, whatever, if we have inflammatory foods for us, then it can show inflammatory in the milk, and then that can affect the skin as well for the babies. So when we're nursing, it's definitely really critical of what we're consuming. And then the same, you're taught to do topical, everything topical, right? When there's eczema. So a big piece of that, right, is figuring out some of the more gut healing foods, if you're nursing or again, just for the baby, so that you're working on that. And a big piece, at least in Chinese medicine with that damp heat kind of thing, is of course minimizing sugar, but having enough. We worked a lot with like sweet potato and yam are some of the most nurturing foods to
Mhm.
start with for the gut, at least in Chinese medicine, because they help your spleen and stomach chi, which for a baby and little one is still like forming and you're trying to nourish that. And so they're having a big issue with trying to digest and learn how to do those things. And so the sweet potato with either breast milk or whatever you're or on its own as one of the first foods was a very something that we're taught in Chinese medicine to utilize because you're
Right.
trying to heal the gut and give it a good foundation.
Yeah. 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 The nursing, I mean, and I was a nursing mom when all this was going on. I had to, yeah, like it was actually a good thing because then you can control like what
Yeah.
goes in, right? Like
Yeah.
you can take the supplements, you can eat the cleanest diet ever, and you don't have to, worry about your kid not eating it. Yeah. All the nursing moms that come through here, they're a part of the eczema plan. They're the part of the eczema plan, and that's okay. But then you also keeping in mind, like, you don't wanna be detoxing yourself, right?
No, yeah. No, that's a big thing too, because the people if you're still nursing, that's not the time to detox. And again, so even of course, I think most people know that when you're pregnant, but the main reason too with the pregnancy is because the fetus is there to protect the mom. So they will absorb more of the toxins to protect the mom because
No
the
way.
sounds so weird, but the mom is the host for the
Mhm,
fetus.
mhm.
The fetus's job is to protect the host. And so it's, like, extra influential in a bad way when you're exposed to toxins when you're pregnant for the fetus.
How interesting, I never thought of it that way.
It's the because a lot of people change up, like, their skincare and things like that a little late, right?
Mhm.
It not always during pregnancy, but whatever you're putting on your skin is just going straight through the bloodstream and then to the fetus. And so it's why I'm a big fan of the preconception cleansing for, like, a year before, if you can. I know a lot of people don't do it that long, but it's ideal if you can.
So what would be a part of that protocol? Because yes,
Oh,
that'd be
sure.
ideal. I never did anything like that, which then you saw my results. My kids are doing great now, thank goodness, like, knock on wood, but
Yeah.
yeah, what can you do if you're in that phase, what can you do?
For sure, at least, like, for sure, the lifestyle things of, like, getting rid of, not drinking out of plastic, having really good quality food and water and all of that. And then your personal care products, a lot of anything that's applied all over your skin is the first thing to clean up, right? That's a lotion is very different than just a mascara, right? Because
Mhm.
that's very little surface area, but anything slathered all over you is like first and foremost. And so really cleaning that up. And a lot of times we have great options now, but before, people it would something would appear natural, but it really had just a few ingredients that were herbs and they could say it's natural, right? So
Mhm.
luckily we have lots of great options now, but just learning about that and then making sure, again, that you're taking some sort of good liver support. So that could be in the form of like milk thistle or dandelion or schisandra, an herb. If you do well with methylated B vitamins, if you need that, then that's good, or B vitamins. Making sure I do like glutathione if it's tolerated to help pull out some of the toxins. And then the binders I use are usually a fulvic and humic acid base.
Mhm.
And so you can go through and be working on those. And then again, I just think there's often a big connection between parasites and eczema too. So I do like doing some parasite cleansing prior to pregnancy. And then, if needed with the little kids when they're a little bit older through herbs. Of course, minerals, like minerals are very key to prep you as well because there's so many things, when you're pregnant, it's so easy. You're just going through all your vitamins and minerals so quickly that,
Mhm.
I think all of us woke up with Charlie horses and like the leg cramps that were horrible, and all of the things. And then making sure you're having a lot of good fat. So for some people, that's taking some sort of oils or just utilizing a lot more olive oil. Things like just keep very nourished, right? Think of nourishing, even though you're kind
Mhm.
of cleansing through detox, but think of it more as nourishing your system and preparing for pregnancy.
Yeah, really good advice, and it's, like, the same, as what we talk about here. It's
Yeah.
just, like, how can we make each bite as nourishing as possible? Because now
Yeah.
we're in this state of dis-ease, and we just need to get back to it. So just every spoonful needs to have that extra, like, power punch of
Yes.
all the things that we just talked about. Yeah, our body can start to, create more glutathione and function more optimally and have that next, round of cells come out better and plumper and more intact.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's because I mean, a lot of these foundations, they're important for everybody all the time, right? But again, it's almost like front loading your system, cleaning it out a bit, and then preparing it for that time that is gonna be just a a stress on your system when you're pregnant
Yeah.
because it's so many changes, and then really optimizing your and supporting your liver because a lot of us have, some issues with like histamine and that surge of all the hormones, especially when you have girls.
Hmm.
So again, in kind of in Chinese medicine, when you have girls and you already have some issues with maybe histamine or mast cell or just, you get headaches, migraines and things, your likelihood of getting a lot of long-term morning sickness is very high. And so like I was one I was sick until the day I gave birth. So it was a
Oh no.
very long process. I kept hoping for it to go away, but it didn't.
Yeah.
And I've kind of figured it out in hindsight. But again, sometimes the boys give the mom like this extra energy and chi. And sometimes women feel amazing when they're pregnant, right? But I would
Sure.
say not all of us did. But there's some, they're like, this was the best I ever felt. And a lot of times it's with the boys, they have that young energy and it like gives them energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I can't say I felt my best, most vibrant self
No,
ever being pregnant, but
no.
yeah,
But
it's the
it's
same.
worth it. It's worth it.
It's so worth it. It's so worth it,
Yeah.
and it's just, it feels like what you're saying is, be really cognizant of what's coming in and your exposures,
Yeah.
and
'Cause we know too, we all have, like, the best hopes for how we're gonna eat when we're pregnant and all those things, and a lot of the times you're just really trying to not be sick all day or whatever it is and just kind of, like,
Mhm.
get through till the time it's a little bit easier to manage. But, again, yeah, just give yourself grace during all of that because your body is working so hard and,
Yeah, yeah,
it's but you and then again, you're building the foundation for your child, so it's
yeah.
important.
So, according to TCM, this is just different line of questioning, but I was just wondering, like, why do children seem to be itchier at night? Like, what's going on with their organ system so that presents, like, more intensely at night?
Sure. So, well, I was going to say definitely with the histamine can be more active at night, right?
Mhm,
So, and then again, in Chinese medicine, heat is more active at night. So, we talk about night sweats, right? During perimenopause or menopause. So, it's kind of the same thing in the fact that the heat is more active. And so it can create more of a response. And, a lot of things are actually more active at night, right? Like the asthma attacks. And then there's that usually happen around that lung time, which is 3 to 5 a.m. So a lot of the times too, that's also an overlap with like a histamine surge as well. But again, yeah, the way in TCM it works is things that are kind of yin oriented, which is at night, but when there's a heat component that's like a heat that's not supposed to be there, it can flare.
mhm,
And then of course that's very difficult because it's in the middle of the night and your kids wake up, itching and really uncomfortable and have a hard time sleeping.
hmm,
But it's
yeah,
kind of similar to how we have hot flashes at night in perimenopause and menopause. It's the
right,
heat, and then it's activating.
right. So what could we do to counter that, to get just a few more hours of sleep?
Sure. So you could look and see if there's like a time that comes up. So the liver time is 1 to 3. The
Mhm,
liver also is responsible for almost like eczema indirectly in the fact that it deals more with the toxin breakdown, right? So if it's more of a toxin component, it could be, a big flare between 1 to 3. So then you would look to liver support herbs or like homeopathics for liver drainage.
mm,
And then if it's more like 3 to 5 a.m., that's more of the lung time. And the lungs correspond to the skin. Like that's their organ, the outward organ. And so a lot of times there's a lot of problems around that time. And so then you
mm,
could look at more lung supportive herbs if they felt like there was a bit of a connection with that and lung drainage. But we also want to look in general. I love some homeopathics that work on the lymph, that work on the GI drainage, just because a lot of the times, again, it's all very connected and it's kind of hard to like piece it out of which one it is exactly.
mhm.
But you can tell if there seems to be an exacerbation, or again, if you look at the body of like where the eczema is popping up, sometimes that can help too.
So, most commonly, it's popping up, right, like, just in those damp places,
Yeah, the
right, inside
corner,
the
the
elbows, behind
creases,
the
right?
knees, and yeah.
A lot of the times, again, we still mostly look at long gut, and with gut, that's large intestine,
Mhm.
and then still liver, right, because of that kind of, like, heat component as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know everyone experiencing eczema also has this digestive weakness happening, right? There's
Yes.
bloating and constipation and there's food reactions and
Yeah.
low appetite. How does that show up as eczema in TCM?
So with that, so lung, large intestine is the pair, skin is the organ connected to both organs. So the large intestine, especially if it's not, yeah, if like you're not going to the bathroom regularly, it can also show up as so spleen and stomach are also part of the gut, right? And so the spleen has to do with the digestion. And it also has to do with the emotion of like worry. So a lot of people or a lot of kids sometimes even when they're little, have a lot of anxiety and worry. And
Hmm.
so sometimes if you have a little kiddo who has that, we look at nourishing the spleen and the stomach. And so for the little kids, I would do something too where it's the color is yellow. So I'd have them do like a little meditation or visualization of just like a bright yellow, like surrounding their abdomen and
Hmm.
coming in. Because sometimes the kids can visualize things nicely, like before bed. Right. And so that's kind of like a healing color for the kids for their, if they're having eczema, and especially if it's they have a lot of digestive issues too.
Interesting. So can you expand on that? What does that mean when you say like the color is yellow?
But yeah, so that's one thing I love is in Chinese medicine, they have a color associated with every organ, which is associated kind of with a season. So there's certain foods that help with that.
Uh-huh.
And so for the spleen, stomach, so most of the digestive issues, yellow is the color that either one would visualize or wear or um, eat more foods that are yellow, things like that, to help nourish that organ pair. And so
Yeah.
for the like for the liver, it's green, the liver and gallbladder. So a lot of the times that's where some of the green foods and like green apples, those can help the gallbladder and the liver, but things that are sour. So we also have a taste. So
Uh-huh.
with spleen stomach, it's sweet, right? But too much sweet creates dampness and
Uh-huh.
then that damp heat, right? So that's why more things like ice cream are not ideal, but like a little bit of sweet is good. Like a natural fruit is sweet in a good
Right.
way, but not
Right. To be clear, we're not talking about graham crackers. We're talking
no, no, no,
about
then you've gone on to, the part that will create more dampness, because as you know, there's a big correlation, right, with sugar and eczema. So someone can go and have some, like, too many sweet treats and get a big flare
yeah,
because it can
yeah,
create a lot of dampness and the damp heat.
yeah. So what about the lungs then, since you said it's so correlated with the skin,
It's
what's the color
white.
of the lung?
Yeah,
White?
so white is the color for lungs, and so then I would tell the little kids to just imagine, like, a bright, sparkling white, just, like, sitting on their chest and clearing that out.
How interesting. Is there one for, like, the brain?
So we don't talk about the brain in the same way. It's not part of the organs, really,
Mhm.
in a strange way, but you would still go with the probably the spleen stomach because of the gut-brain connection. So they have a different concept, which is the heart and the mind together, which is called the Shen. So that is, again, it's not really its own organ, but it's like it's a big part of like the energy centers. So
Okay.
and you can't separate the heart and the mind in Chinese medicine. It's
Right.
its own thing.
So the color for the heart would be
Red.
yeah. This is so fun.
Yeah, and it's great for and again, like, I love it with kids, right? Because you can just tell them about a color and, like, for before bed or if I when I was giving acupuncture and if it was for little kids, I would just tell them the color and just have them focus on the color while they're just laying and relaxing or before bed. And then again, yeah, if there's someone who's, like, very irritable and angry, that's green, that's the liver.
Mhm.
So, a lot of the kids get frustrated, right? Because they're in pain too and it's itchy and things like that. So if they're more on that side, then green is the color.
So that's so great. That's like a really practical thing that we could all do, right? That will also just help with their nervous system, help with all the things. I
Yes.
love that. If a parent who's listening wants to just start supporting their child holistically today, what
Uh-huh.
are 3 easy TCM aligned steps that they could do at home?
So, yeah, so for TCM type of purpose, I would say, well, and I guess this goes with it. Yeah, a lot of the things would be to look first at maybe like how is your child reacting, right? To get an idea of their emotions that are kind of flaring up. If there's someone who gets more sad versus mad, you know what I mean? Or
Mhm, mhm.
like if they easily cry or they're frustrated, kind of just look to see, again, like how is their nervous system really reacting to everything? Because that's such a big piece. Like if you have a child who's very dysregulated, it's hard for these things to really help as well as they potentially could. Right. So maybe
Mhm.
implementing some practices like we do the legs up the wall at night. Right.
Mm.
So just, and you can do that with the kids. It's so easy. And so just some sort of practice to kind of like calm their system down.
Mhm.
And then this is still TCM thing, but so food-wise, we only eat warm cooked foods. Like,
Mhm.
there's not really cold and raw. Like, of course, if they're gonna have some fruit and some, you know, veggies, it's okay, but we really like everything warm and cooked. And so especially for digestion, even with the skin connection, that would be ideal, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
more so ideal is, like, actually just whole foods that aren't processed, right? So that's probably, like, the utmost thing, you know what I mean? As opposed to I don't wanna limit someone's raw carrots and things like that if
Right.
I'm
Right.
trying to get away from cookies, you know what I mean? So yeah, and then the same too, if you're dealing with kind of the heat component and the damp heat component, just sugar, right? Looking at sugar, I think, is one of the top tier things because it really just pours gasoline on a fire that's already burning in their gut and skin. So I think that's one of the most critical things to minimize if possible.
Yeah. Yeah. So if your child is like leaning more like, like on the mad side of the spectrum, like if
Yeah.
their default is anger, what is
Yeah.
that? That's
I would
saying they're
say
like,
then to look for what toxins are probably implicated, right? So that's where we would for sure look for mold, or sometimes people have, like strep or staph or things like that. And then again, I think we talked a little bit, but parasites can be a big piece with eczema. And
mhm,
so, if your child is kind of really all over the place, which is what we see all the time now, right? Like there's so many neurological issues and PANS and PANDAS and all these things.
mhm,
Their system is just overwhelmed, right? And it's showing up neurologically, which again is a step further than the skin. So if someone has those big outbursts and rage and things like that, then I would really look at maybe what toxins could be implicating like the or creating the eczema, and the same with some parasites too. Like if they also flare up around the full moon, if their skin flares up around the full moon, that could be a sign that parasites might be a piece. The same if they're sensitive to dairy, that's often a one to look into.
hmm.
That's kind of a big connection.
What if they lean more sad, they're crying a lot and they respond with sadness?
So again, what's interesting is it's still the liver, right? So it just could almost default to their personality of
Mhm.
if there's someone who like kind of goes inward or versus the anger is usually the sadness like directed outward. So it still points us to the liver
Yeah.
being overburdened. It just might be their personality is different.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, these kids are under duress, right? They're uncomfortable. They are sad, they are mad, they are frustrated, and so a little extra grace there, but yeah, those are good things to check out, and certainly parasites and are worthwhile knowing, like, if this is a longstanding issue and diet and all the things that you're setting up aren't moving the dial, then that's something
Yeah.
absolutely that we need to start addressing, and
And the
anything you can do.
parasite testing isn't very reliable, so it's mostly I go off, like, as symptoms, if they're, like, grinding their teeth or, again, of course, if they have itchiness and things like that. A lot of kids get pinworms and things like that, and they have symptoms. So
Yeah.
or again, a lot of kids love sushi, right? Because they eat sushi with their parents, and so if
Mhm.
doing that regularly, I would put some of these gentle cleansing, either parasite cleansing foods or herbs in their kind of rotation and see how it helps with their skin.
So what are those herbs and foods that would serve as,
So
like, parasite cleanse?
pumpkin seeds are one of the foods, things that have kind of like clove is one. And then again, a lot of the herbs are more of like the black walnut. So if they're, make sure they don't have a nut allergy.
Mhm.
There's mimosa pudica, which is a seed. There's the artemisia. There's just a few good herbs that are wormwood that have been used a long time.
And, I work with a TCM, like, he's kinda like my family
Yeah.
doctor. I see him, and I don't bring the kids in, like, hardly ever. I just tell him what's going on with the kids.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But, Yeah, Chinese herbs are so powerful and they're so great, but dang, if they're not hard to take because they do
Uh,
not taste very good, do you
yeah.
have any recommendations to make it go down a little smoother?
So for Chinese herbs, or I do use herbal tinctures, and if they might have glycerin for the kids or adults that want them to be a little more palatable. So
Uh-huh.
you can use herbs that have that, or a lot of times I'll open up capsules and then you can mix them in with kind of like applesauce or nut butter if someone can tolerate that.
Yeah.
And you might need to kind of hide them. That's really the only time I kind of suggest any juice is like if you're trying to get a binder in or something.
Mhm.
Basically, it still should, the benefit of the binder or the herb should overpower whatever the juice is going to do, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
then sometimes with parasites, the juice helps kind of, like, draw them out because they wanna have the sweets. So,
Yeah.
yeah, applesauce, again, a lot of kids can't tolerate yogurt, but if they can, or coconut yogurt, then you could mix things in there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes people use honey, but again, it's very tricky, right? Because some of these very sweet or fermented things might not be the best for your child with these overgrowths in their gut and things like that.
Mm. Mhm, mhm. I
Yeah.
know. Sometimes you just gotta take it, and some of these kids, you'd be like, I don't know, I'm sure you see them all the time in your practice. They're just like they can just take a shot of cod liver oil and then, yeah, it's just amazing. I'm like, "Kudos to you, kid. You should teach a class, like, this is
Yeah.
incredible."
Yeah, I did not, my daughter was not that way. Like, she will
Yeah.
take any homeopathic, anything, and then as she got a little older, they're like, "What's in this water?" "There's something in here," and it's just a homeopathic, right? They're just drops, and I was like,
Right, right.
"Really? You can taste the 3 drops in there?"
I know, I know, I know.
So the
Kids.
juice, yeah, I've had patients, like, bake fulvic things into cookies, and they were like, they were dark double chocolate chip cookies, so they were extra dark. And so and then or they would mix it in chocolate ice cream, and I was like, "Well,
Yeah.
that's a good idea. There you go." Yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Like, my biggest successes are putting things in, like, homemade ice cream or popsicles. 'Cause, like, they're definitely
Yeah,
gonna need it.
yeah, the popsicles are a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for the parents that are just exhausted and discouraged, and it just feels
Yeah.
like it works up till now, what would you want them to hear?
I would say the thing that moved the needle the most for my patients, and again, most of them, mold was a big piece, was a fulvic humic binder, and that was like one of the main things that helped the most. And again, it takes a long time. They're on this for a long time, but usually their toxin load is pretty high. And so, again, you're not trying to like detox your kids aggressively. You're just trying to give them little bits every day so that it's helping get out of their system in a very gentle manner. The last thing you want to do is exacerbate their condition and make it much worse.
Yeah, yeah. Where could you get a fulvic or humic binder?
The one I use, 2 different ones. I use a Cellcore one called Biotoxin Binder is one I use a lot, and then, I use one from company called Aegis, and they have a toxin binder that's a powder. Yeah.
We will link those things in the show notes. Everyone listening is, like, so well researched and on
Yes.
it. Anything that will help where they are now. Dr. Ashley, I really appreciate your time today. This was so practical, so interesting. I really appreciate the time you took to just share your wisdom.
Of course, yeah, I'm very passionate about the kids because again, it's, you can really change their whole health trajectory, right? If you clean these things up too, you can potentially get rid of like the anxiety that they might get as they're older, or depression, and then again, not to mention a lot of people have eczema their whole life, right? It's not something that necessarily just goes away, or it comes and goes. And for most adults, it's like it's a really big deal, right? It's not something that anybody wants to live with, let alone you see your kids suffering with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So where can everybody find, follow, connect with you?
Sure. So my Instagram is Dr. Ashley Beckman, and my website is drashley.com. And yeah, I'm available, and love to connect with people and then see if it's a good fit. And again, just share information so that you guys can try to help your kids as much as you can as well.
Thank you. Because right, that's so true. It's just like no matter who you're working with, you're the one ultimately doing it, right? You're the one implementing it. And so
Yeah, and you're the
Yeah.
one that has to implement this and try to get your kids to take the things and eat healthy, which much easier when they're little, and then as they get older, they're not as always as amenable unless their symptoms are bad enough, right? Most of the time when they see the difference, then they will stick with it. But I mean, most of us know even ourselves how long, sometimes you cheat and do things, and depending on how severe it is, you get the consequences, but you're really trying to teach them to make these choices for themselves for the rest of their life.
Yeah. No, that is what's beautiful. It's like you get their buy-in because they don't wanna live like this. That even
No.
two-year-olds are like, "I'm miserable. No, sure, I'll eat this instead. That's fine if it'll help with my spots." That's what I used to tell my two-year-old. And
Yeah.
everyone under 2, they'll just eat what you give them, and then yeah, 2 and over, you just gotta you really gotta get their buy-in, but it's usually generally granted because they don't wanna live like this.
Mm-mm. No. Again, it's something wonderful to work with kids so that we can really help them and guide them. And then, yeah, it all ultimately comes back to the parents implementing things and setting them up for success.
Well, thank you. All those resources will be put in the show notes, and thank you again, and we'll talk soon.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on.
That was so good, right? If you're thinking, this is us, here's your next move. You don't have to move houses or drop money on endless tests to see progress. You need a plan that supports the gut, calms the immune system, and lowers the toxic load, and strengthens the skin barrier day after day. That's exactly what we do inside the eczema elimination method. You'll get the food framework, the supplement strategy, detox and home environmental guides, and real support, one on one support while you make all of these changes. Families come in overwhelmed and leave with calmer skin and better sleep and a home that finally helps instead of hurts. Join us at eczemakids.com. And quick favor with a perk, friends. If this episode helped at all, leave a podcast review and then email a screenshot of it to support@eczemakids.com. I'll send you a 30% off coupon in return for any product inside the Natural Eczema Shop. Share this with a parent in the trenches, and I will talk to you next week.
Thank you for helping with my eczema. Love you.
Thank you for listening today, friend. I know healing your child's skin isn't easy, but you're doing it one smart step at a time. If this episode gave you a little hope or a better night's sleep, leave a quick review so more exhausted parents can find Eczema Kids and finally rest easy too. Follow, share, and let's help more kids heal. Take care.